podcast from the field this year. We are hanging out in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 160 years since the terrible 3 days in July 1863. Now, you know how we feel about those July days here in Gettysburg on the show. We are Antietam guys, so we are not the storytellers for you when it comes to Gettysburg. That's why we tap an absolute legend. You are obviously listening right now as you drive to this battlefield to our episode with Scott Hartwig, where we talk about the battle in full. But Scott is joining us today because we're going to talk about the battle here, or the fighting rather, in Herbst Woods. Highest casualties, worst casualties. How would you describe the fighting behind us here on July 1st, 1863?
Well, if you look at it percentage-wise, the percentage that the regiments who fought in this area lost on July the 1st, it was the bloodiest fighting of the entire battle. So it's, I mean, a lot of people who aren't like real students of the battle, and they just have some passing knowledge of it, they'll always think Pickett's Charge or Little Round Top, the Devil's Den, or the Wheat Field.
Those are the sexy places.
Right, one of the things about the Wheat Field is one of the legends is that you could walk across the field on the bodies, even though most of the casualties were actually in the woods around the field.
Right.
But this Herbst Woods tended to get overlooked, the fighting that was here, but every regiment that fought in the woods, which was the most of the regiments were from the Iron Brigade.
It's Matt's boys.
Look
Look at that shirt right there. Matt wore the t-shirt of the band we're going to see, by the way. I thought that was a non-starter, but I guess this isn't a metal concert. So you can do that here.
But they were, this was a Western Brigade. It was composed of regiments from Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana. One of the regiments was detached to 6th Wisconsin. They fought out of our frame to the north of us at the railroad cut and back along the northern end of Seminary Ridge, which is called Oak Ridge, up on that part. But the 4 other regiments fought in the woods, and what made the woods important in the battle is that woods provide you cover and concealment.
Yes.
So if you have a wheat field, it might provide you some concealment. It doesn't provide you cover because it doesn't stop bullets or shell fragments.
Trees will eat bullets.
Trees will eat bullets.
Yes.
So as long as any Union force controls Herbst Woods behind you on the first day of the battle, no Confederate force can move down the Chambersburg Turnpike, the main road going into Gettysburg, or to the south of us, the Hagerstown or Fairfield Road. It's the road with many names. The Hagerstown Road, the Fairfield Road. So it goes to Fairfield and then goes on to Hagerstown.
All right.
Anyway, so as long as there's any Union force in these woods, you can't pass towards Gettysburg along the roads. You have to dislodge these guys from the woods. Now, the units that are in the woods, the Iron Brigade units that defended the woods, and they got the nickname the Iron Brigade during the Maryland campaign of 1862 at South Mountain and in Antietam. And one thing you could say about this brigade, there are other brigades. There's another brigade in the Army of the Potomac at the Battle of Antietam that was called the Iron Brigade.
Yes, but they were not as cool as Matt's Iron Brigade.
They were named because they made a really long march in the spring of 1862. Right. There was the Gibraltar Brigade. There was a lot of brigades that thought of themselves as very special. I would say one thing about this particular brigade, the Irish Brigade's another one, is it upheld its reputation on every battlefield that it was in. Now, Gettysburg essentially destroyed the brigade. It was reconstituted. It would fight well in the 1864 campaign, the Overland campaign, but Gettysburg was a bloodbath. When we think about the defense of this woods, so the Iron Brigade is tasked with defending the woods, you think, oh, you know, we want to tell this great story. These guys were brave. You know, they just bit down on their hardtack and they're like, all right, we'll do whatever we got to do.
Strap up their frock coats.
Right. The reality was every regimental commander in the brigade looked at this position and looked at the Confederate forces that were being arrayed against it and said, we don't have a chance of holding this position. And every one of them sent back to the brigade commander, Solomon Meredith, we can't hold this position. We should fall back to a more defensible position. So if you were an infantry commander in that era and you're looking at this position, what you saw instantly from the forces that were being arrayed against you, because the Confederates on July 1st had artillery superiority. Right. So they could deploy their infantry in full view of you as long as they were out of range from you. There's Troy over there. Hey, Troy.
Meeting friends. You cannot come to Gettysburg and not meet friends. If you have never been here before, you're going to come here and meet one of your friends. Just trust me, it's going to happen to you.
That's true.
Anyway, so what you could see if you were one of the if you were one of the regimental commanders, this position could easily be outflanked because you saw the force that the Confederates were building up against you, and you didn't think you had a chance of holding the position. You had no sort of fortification set up or anything like that. So that's why every regimental commander asked permission to fall back to a more defensible position. They don't consider the woods, where they are in the woods, defensible because they don't really have any troops directly protecting their flanks. The troops protecting their flanks are a distance away or farther back. And
Scott, where did they want to go?
well, they don't really say.
Okay.
Some indicate they wanted to fall back out of the woods. Some may have wanted to fall back to Seminary Ridge, where there was better fields of fire, and they could maybe fortify the position. They could have better artillery support back
Which
there.
we'll see later in the morning with them fortifying around the ridge. Okay.
Yeah. So, but the thing was, they, Meredith carried their request on to General Wadsworth, James Wadsworth. He was a division commander. Wadsworth on to Abner Doubleday. He's the corps commander.
Who did not invent baseball. We always say this on the show. Whenever he comes up, he didn't invent baseball. It didn't happen.
Anyway, Doubleday sent back to every one of these requests that came in the same thing: the woods have to be held at all costs.
Right.
Now, what does that mean? What does it mean when somebody says the wood have to be held at all costs? It means that you have to be driven from the woods. You can't order a retreat. You can't fall back.
They have to break your line.
They got to break your line. And we look at this generally abstractly because we don't have to face the consequences of that. We're not one of the regimental commanders, but none of these guys wanted to be a hero. They did not want to die here. They did not want to be a hero. They did not want to become a legend in the Battle of Gettysburg. They wanted to live and fight another day, and but they had to accept the crap sandwich they just been handed, which was what Doubleday is seeing as the senior officer in the Corps, is that I got to hold those woods as long as I can, because the strategy, we think, we don't know this, I mean, we think based upon the decisions that John F. Reynolds made, the strategy of July the 1st is trade men for time.
Yes.
So
I was going to ask you, what is the objective in this moment? And it sounds like trading men.
Trade men for time.
I got to be here.
If the Confederates take these woods, there's a term in military science and studying battles of key terrain. What is the key terrain on the July 1st battlefield? What is the terrain you have to hold to control the battlefield? And if you were talking key terrain here, there's really, to me, only one key terrain feature on this part of the First Days Field, and it's a mile to the north of us, and it's Oak Hill. Because Oak Hill, an artillery piece up there, commands almost the entire battlefield. If you control Oak Hill, you're going to control the battlefield out here. However, there are other positions that are strong points to achieve your larger purpose, which is if you want to achieve a concentration of the Army of the Potomac on the best defensive terrain south of the town, you need to buy time out here. So these men, the Iron Brigade, Stone's Brigade, all these other guys, their job is to buy that time with their lives, and that's what they're going to do. And if you're the Confederates, your job is to try and drive these guys out of the way so you can push on into Gettysburg and secure the town. The Confederates have a very poor idea of where the Union Army is. They have an idea of how strong it is, but they don't know where it is. Right. They know from POWs they take it in the morning, they're facing the 1st Corps, Buford's Cavalry Division, and they're going to find out that the 11th Corps is here. But they have no idea where the rest of the Union Army is. So if you're a Confederate soldier,
thanks, Jeb.
You don't really know what could be confronting you. And if you're a Union soldier out here, if you're a Union commander like Abner Doubleday, you know what you're facing. So
that's an advantage for a moment.
Oh, it's a huge advantage. So it's a huge advantage, but it's also scary as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're Doubleday, what you know from the intelligence that John Reynolds has given you is that A.P. Hill's Corps is coming against you. Now, in Army intelligence, they believe a Confederate Army Corps is 30,000 men. Right. So you could have up to 30,000 men coming at you, and Longstreet's behind them, and Ewell, is off to the north. So the decision to say, let's trade men for time, let's fight outside the town, That was a bold decision.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
at least the devil you know. That's the
Yeah.
one in front of you. You know what the monster is here. I mean, imagine if you're the Confederate approach. You don't. It's the devil you don't know.
Yeah.
Is it just Buford's dismounted cavalry? Is it the entire Federal Army? Right? They illustrate that scene in the movie that we ripped in the episode. But like but that's a huge part of this. Is like Doubleday knows the tidal wave is coming. He knows it's a tidal wave. Like he knows it, right? But these guys don't know. Is there a little wave coming? Is it a tidal wave facing us? They don't know. It's hairy. I couldn't make the decisions.
Piggybacking off of that, Pat, do we see Confederate forces, particularly the North Carolinians, that are going to be moving through here? Are they just kind of throwing themselves in, hoping to push through quickly, or are they kind of feeling their way forward?
Well, I mean, they get engaged in the battle in a blunder.
Okay.
So that Henry Heath, who leads the reconnaissance and force, it was not a shoe expedition.
Right.
It was a reconnaissance and force, because A.P. Hill, the Corps commander of the Confederate Third Corps, knew that there was he knew there was some sort of guys wearing blue uniforms force in the Gettysburg area. And I say that because there was a feeling at headquarters, at Corps headquarters and division headquarters, that the force that had been seen by James Pettigrew, who had brought his brigade here to search the town for supplies, he had heard drums in the town. He had also seen a cavalry force. He withdrew without any engagement. He reported to Heath and to Hill that he believed the cavalry force was from the Army of the Potomac, because he'd observed them, and when he observed them, their movements were those of trained soldiers, not militia. Right. So but Hill and Heath both believed it might only be a militia force that was in Gettysburg. So if it's a militia,
there's a lot of militia running around.
There's a lot of militia running around Pennsylvania. Jubal Early had a scrape with them on June 26th, which was, they just routed them pretty quickly. So if you're a Confederate officer, if you're A.P. Hill or you're Henry Heath, you don't really worry very much about militia. I mean, you're going to take it seriously because they have guns, right? But they're not a very well trained force. They're not somebody who's going to stand up to you when you're the first team.
Yeah, they should break against your veterans.
Yeah, so I think the feeling was, let's find out what's in our front. Heath, you're going to lead this movement. I'm going to support you with Dorsey Pender. I'm going to take the precaution of asking Ewell to redirect his march to Cashtown to come into Gettysburg from the north. And then if we don't run into anything, then he can just continue his march to Cashtown out the Chambersburg Pike. So the plan is 2 Confederate divisions, one behind the other, push towards Gettysburg from the west. 2 other Confederate divisions will approach Gettysburg from the north, just in case. And there seems to be standing orders for Henry Heath not to bring on an engagement, not to bring on a general engagement.
But his boys got their dander up.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty evident to me that Heath, he falls victim into thinking he can handle it. So he encounters Buford's cavalry. When we see the movie Gettysburg, I mean, they had some great scenes in the movie. Sam Elliott was great as Buford and everything like that. But some of it's just absurd. It's like the cavalry fighting is like the Alamo.
Yeah.
I mean, to put it in perspective, the 2nd Wisconsin Infantry advancing into these woods right behind me, in the opening volley that they take, lose more men, 1 regiment, than Buford's whole division lost on July the 1st.
In one volley?
Yeah.
I did not.
This is
know
Matt's
that.
boys.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yes.
Damn, Matt.
So Buford's division
I don't want to put that on Matt.
does fighting, but they don't lose many men. In fact, the Confederates who were up against them in the morning of July the 1st mentioned that the cavalry gave ground really, really easily. We just pushed them right out of the way. But you also need to remember that the Confederate force under Heath could move no faster than its skirmish line. Right. So if you have a skirmish line out here, you can't go any faster than the guys coming through the woods. The guys in the field to my left here can probably move pretty quick. You can't go faster than these guys over here. You've got to climb over fences, go through buildings, farms, blah, blah. So the skirmish line slows down how fast the column can move. And as the column gets closer to Gettysburg, they're about a mile from us on a ridge called Hare's Ridge. When they get up there, Heath writes in his report that he had now encountered infantry, cavalry, and artillery. He hadn't encountered any infantry, he encountered dismounted cavalry, and I think he may have thought some of them were infantrymen. So that
that's a pretty common mistake too. You see that a lot in these Civil War reports.
But you know, based on his orders, I mean, what he should have done at that point is deployed his division, reported back to AP Hill for orders, and what he did instead was he brought his artillery battalion up. He deployed it along Hare Ridge, a mile from us, started shelling the Union positions. Buford had one battery, horse artillery battery, and what he did with that was very clever. He put two sections, a section's 2 guns, so 4 guns, 2 on each side of the Chambersburg Pike, and he put the other section south of Herbst Woods. And the idea was he wanted to disperse this battery as far as he could to make it seem like he had more guns than he really did. Anyway,
I used to do that with my vegetables on my plate. I would push them away to make it seem like I ate more of them than I really did. It's an old tactic. He's shrewd. He's shrewd.
So anyway, he then decides, I think he feels like he can handle what's in his front. That he can handle it. And
Heath is making the decision.
Heath is making this decision. I can handle what's in my front. I'm going to use 2 brigades of my 4 brigades, and we're just going to push this force out of the way. It looks like a pretty light force. So he deploys Tennessee, Alabama Brigade under James Archer south of the Chambersburg Turnpike, and he deploys General Joseph Davis's Mississippi, North Carolina Brigade north of the Pike. This is a pretty formidable force. Davis, I think, has about 1,800 men in 3 regiments. Archer has about 1,100, so it's close to 3,000 men. Way outnumbers Buford's dismounted cavalry that's over here. And they make their advance. They push the cavalry out of the way really easily, but unbeknownst to them, while they're advancing, General Reynolds, the commander of the 1st Army Corps and also the left wing of the Union Army, he'd been placed in command of that the day before on June 30th. He reaches the field, is briefed by Buford. They come out here somewhere on the battlefield and make a decision as to what they're going to do. And Reynolds makes a really momentous decision.